Rick and Morty is one of my favorite cartoons, and I mean, to be honest, it's probably one of my favorite TV shows in general. And with season 4 coming up in November, I'm pretty dang excited for it. Now, to be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand the intricate complexities of Rick and Morty. The humor is extremely subtle, and without a proper grasp of theoretical physics and existential philosophy, most of the jokes will just fly right over the typical viewer's head. And then there's also Rick's nihilistic outlook on life, which is deftly woven into his characterization. And the fans of the show, we know this, okay? We have the intellectual capacity to truly understand and appreciate these jokes, that they're not just funny, but that they say something truly deep about life. Copy pasta aside, I do think Rick and Morty is a clever show, and I think there are some interesting concepts to talk about within the show. One of these concepts was talked about by Wisecrack almost a year ago, I think. Yeah, it was almost a year ago. And that topic is happiness. There's a lot of different ways to approach the philosophy of happiness, but I'm going to address the specific question that Wisecrack talked about a year ago in their video, and that is, would you rather be a Rick or a Jerry? For those of you who don't know, Rick is the grandfather of Morty. He is a super genius. It's clear within the context of the show that he's probably the smartest man who has ever existed in all of history. He creates all these inventions and interdimensional portals and everything. They go on these adventures. Anyway, Rick is the super smart, super arrogant person, and he's super miserable.
Morty, do you know what wubbalubbadubdub means?
That's just Rick's stupid nonsense catchphrase.
It's not nonsense at all. In my people's tongue, it means, I am in great pain. Please help me.
Well, I got news for you. He's saying it ironically.
No, Morty. Your grandfather is indeed in very deep pain. That is why he must numb himself.
And Jerry, on the other hand, is just kind of a simpleton, kind of dumb guy. He's easily satisfied, easily well-pleased with things. So the question Wisecracked asked is it better to be a Rick or a Jerry? Is it better to be smart and miserable or dumb and happy? This definitely echoes a quote from John Stuart Mill. It is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. And if the fool or the pig is of a different opinion, it is only because they only know their own side of the question. But the answer that Wisecrack provided is less than satisfying.
To our original question, is it really better to know the worst and be unhappy than to be happy in a fool's paradise? To be a Rick rather than a Jerry? Research says, well, that's a subjective-ass question. And frankly, psychology doesn't have a concrete answer.
Where Wisecrack approached the issue from a psychological perspective, I will try to solve the issue from a philosophical one. I'll be using theories of Aristotle and Christine Korsgaard to hopefully show, that the question that Wisecrack asked is the wrong question. It is not good to be a Rick, and it's not good to be a Jerry either. Before we can really talk about this issue, we need to first discuss what happiness is in and of itself. Between different philosophers and different psychologists, a clear, concrete definition of happiness seems elusive. What makes issues within the philosophy of happiness difficult is that it seems no one can really agree on what happiness is. Is happiness an emotion or a state of mind? And if so, what kind of emotion, what kind of state of mind is it? I think back to when Star Wars Episode 7 was coming out, and I was seeing it opening night, and I had waited all this time, I had watched all the movies in preparation, and I was so excited. Was that happiness, or was that something else? Others might say they feel pretty good while they're high on drugs. Is that happiness, or is that something else? If you're just content with life, and nothing ever gets you down, but nothing ever riles you up too much, but you're just pleased and content, is that happiness, or is that something else? For Aristotle, happiness isn't an emotion. It's not a state of mind. It is an activity. It's living a good life. Aristotle writes that happiness is not a disposition, for if it were, it might belong to someone who is asleep throughout his life, living the life of a plant, or again, to someone who is suffering the greatest misfortunes, and that happiness, therefore, does not lie in amusement. It would indeed be strange if the end were amusement, and one were to take trouble and suffer hardships all one's life in order to amuse oneself. Right? And that sort of makes sense, because as people, as humans, we go through all of these things. We go to work, we do our laundry, we wash the dishes, we do all these bothersome chores in order to make us happy. And it seems counterproductive that we would do all these things that we hate and make us miserable in order so that we can be happy. Either we're really bad at accomplishing our goals, or happiness is something else. Happiness isn't amusement or a disposition or an emotion. Happiness is some other thing. For Aristotle, the activity of reason will be the complete happiness of man, because the self-sufficiency, leisureliness, unweariedness, and all other attributes ascribed to the supremely happy man are evidently those connected with this activity. For man, therefore, the life according to reason is best and pleasantest. In other words, for Aristotle, being happy is living a life in correspondence to reason. Being happy means you're participating in the activity of contemplation. But that seems odd because, going back to our example from Rick and Morty, Rick is clearly smart. He clearly contemplates things, right? He can see problems and find solutions to those problems, and he thinks a lot, right? That's evident through all the things that he invents. Enter Christine Korsgaard. Christine Korsgaard is a contemporary Kantian philosopher who is awesome, and I highly suggest checking some of her work out because it's great. In her book, Self-Constitution, Agency, Identity, and Integrity, she sort of blends the theories of Aristotle and Immanuel Kant together. The idea of her argument is that humans are condemned to act. It is our plight. We necessarily make decisions and act on those decisions. And because of that fact, agency is sort of thrust upon us as people. Okay? To be good people, we have to be good at making those decisions. She argues that the essential characteristics of an agent are efficacy and autonomy. An agent is efficacious when she succeeds in bringing about whatever state of affairs she intended to bring about through her action, and an agent is autonomous when her movements are in some clear sense self-determined or her own. So in other words, according to Aristotle, we need to live a life of contemplation to be good, and Korsgaard extends that idea of contemplation to decision-making and taking action. And according to Korsgaard, the rules for being a good agent, or in other words, being a good person, is to be efficacious and autonomous. Applying this to Rick, Rick is not good at this kind of activity. Now you might be thinking, hold up, how is Rick not efficacious? He clearly succeeds in bringing about whatever state of affairs he intended to bring out through his action, and in a sense that's true. He does solve a lot of his problems through science and through experimentation and inventions, and so in that sense, he is effective and efficacious in carrying out those kinds of tasks. But it's clear that Rick longs for something, right? I think he desires to be happy. And none of his actions throughout the course of the show has produced that. Nothing he does makes him happy. And therefore, he's not effective at being happy. He's not efficacious in that sense. And what's more interesting to me is that he's not autonomous. And what I mean by that is that his will is conflicting. His will is particularistic. In the episode where he goes through that detox spa or whatever, and he comes out and his toxic self is separated from his purified self, in that episode, both toxic Rick and purified Rick show affection towards Morty.
Hey, here's something no science could measure. I'm real proud to be your grandpa, Morty. Thanks, Rick. I love you.
Didn't you learn last time that you can't beat me?
Yeah, I did. And then I learned something else. This. That bullet is laced with an encrypted nanobotic virus that will disintegrate your Morty in about 20 minutes. The decryption key that neutralizes the virus, you want it? Come and get it. Merge with me and you'll know how to save him.
What is your problem?
Oh, I had all my problems removed. My entitlement, my narcissism, my crippling loneliness, my irrational attachments.
Just do it! Just do it, you piece of...
I'm back, baby! Regular Rick!
This tells me that either Rick doesn't know whether or not he cares about Morty, or that he views his love for Morty as both a good and a bad thing. That seems contradictory Therefore, his will is particularistic. Therefore, he is not autonomous. And then when it comes to Jerry, clearly he's not efficacious in any sense of the word, because he fails at everything. And also, I think it's safe to say that he doesn't really live a life of contemplation. And so when it comes down to it, would you rather be a Rick or a Jerry? Well, neither of them live a good life. Neither of them are happy. I wouldn't want to be either of them. It's a very Aristotelian idea that because humans have the ability to reason and to think, that is what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. That is what we need to focus on as humans. That's the purpose of our existence, is to think and to reason. Korsgaard goes another step further and defines what the rules are for thinking and reasoning, that we have to be autonomous and efficacious. Without going too much into her argument, being autonomous and efficacious inevitably leads to living good, moral, wholesome lives. In her own words, the way to make yourself into an agent, a person, is to make yourself into a particular person with a practical identity of your own. And the way to make yourself into a particular person who can interact well with herself and others is to be consistent and unified and whole, to have integrity. Which absolutely connects to Aristotle's theory that virtue and excellence are connected to happiness, that happiness and morality are inseparable from one another. And so according to Aristotle and Korsgaard, to be happy, we need to fulfill our function. We need to fulfill our purpose in life, which is autonomous, efficacious contemplation and action. But what do you guys think? What does it mean to be happy? Is it better to be a Rick or a Jerry, or neither? If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. I'm going to try to do more philosophy videos. I know I do a lot of video game stuff and I talk about random things. I'm going to try to do more philosophy videos. So if you like this, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thanks.